My fault? I barely managed to speak, merely echoing mother-in-law Aria's words. That's exactly what I mean. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. I do not acknowledge you as Noel's wife. You're not suitable. That's what I mean. Why? Why all of a sudden? Why say such things? It's a problem that you've lived this long without understanding such things. Realize it. It's true what they say, children from low-level single-parent homes often have issues. Seeing you has only reinforced that belief. My name is Sierra. I'm a 35-year-old office worker, living with my husband and elementary school-aged child, a family of 3. Since the beginning of my marriage, we've lived close to my husband Noel's family home. We maintained a good relationship while keeping a comfortable distance. The turning point in our relationship with father-in-law and Aria came a few years ago. They always cared for us, and we were grateful, but father-in-law passed away after a long illness. Aria's grief at losing father-in-law was painfully evident to me. At that time, considering Noel's commute, we planned to move, but seeing Aria's condition made leaving her alone worrisome. Noel and I discussed it many times. We decided to stay put until Aria's situation stabilized. That's when it started. Slowly but surely, Aria began to overstep our personal space. When father-in-law was alive, Aria never visited our home unnecessarily. She never came unannounced, not as far as I knew. But now, she suddenly started showing up without any notice. It began as a day or two, but recently she's at our house half the week. If only she gave prior notice, I could bear it, but entertaining Aria when she's so unpleasant is disheartening. Especially since she only brings unpleasant conversations. Sierra, you're always home late, aren't you? Are you that busy with work? Are you taking proper care of Noel? What exactly do you mean by proper care? Just what I said. Are you serving nutritious meals and looking after his health? Noel is the pillar of our family, my precious son. Sierra, you're not just serving him frozen meals and hot deli food because you're short on time, are you? She glanced at the freezer. Her demeanor suggested she might just open it. Well, not always, but sometimes, yes. Noel tells me not to overdo it, too. Really? But just because you discussed it with Noel doesn't mean you can neglect proper meals. It's just laziness. You should be able to manage that, considering Noel's health. What are your thoughts on this? Every time I tried to speak, Aria's tone grew harsher. I'm sorry, Aria. I try, but it's hard to find the time. That's just laziness. I've worked for many years. I understand the difficulties of working women. But despite that, I've overcome and provided healthy meals and maintained our household for my husband and Noel. From my experience, not having time is just an excuse. Stop making excuses, Sierra. Show some responsibility as a homemaker in charge of your family's health. I can't rest easy otherwise. Aria, a longtime middle school teacher, always judges everything by her standards, without considering others. Since a minor incident in middle school due to my family background, I've had a poor impression of teachers. That includes Aria, a former teacher. I understand Aria cares about our family in her way. That's why I can't say anything and just listen, enduring her lectures. But maybe my attitude seemed unreliable, as Aria's behavior gradually changed. Before, she used to come unannounced to lecture or make snide remarks, but lately, she started bringing homemade meals. And always in such large quantities that our family couldn't finish in one go. Mostly Noel's favorites. At first, I thanked her for her efforts. Encouraged by this, Aria began bringing food daily. Sierra, I understand you're busy, but can't you come home earlier? The meals I prepare get cold because I can't get them inside. I want Noelle to eat them while they're hot. I'm sorry, I do want to come home early, but it's just a busy period at work right now. But you say that, yet isn't it just that you're not good at your job? I heard on TV recently that people who are good at their jobs manage to leave on time. On the contrary, those who aren't good stay late and work overtime. It's like they were talking about you, Sierra. Aren't you, in fact, not good at your job? Arya always had a mean look on her face when she said such things. No, that's not it. I think I do my job well enough. Displeased with my attitude, Arya's face clearly showed her annoyance. I'm only making and bringing these meals because you always serve hot deli food. Don't you understand that if you come home late because of work, it's all for nothing? Don't you feel even a bit sorry for receiving all these meals I've made? She spoke as if expecting gratitude was a given. I never asked her to cook for us. Neither did Noelle, of course. I thanked her and accepted the meals, but it was all Arya imposing her goodwill. To me, it was a nuisance, albeit one I was grateful for. Then, one day, Arya said something that pushed me to my limit. Sierra, I've been thinking. You're never home when I visit, right? So, to avoid wasting these meals, I think it's better if I also have a key to your house. That way, I can drop off the food anytime. Plus, with things being unsafe these days, I can quickly come over if something happens. Just ask Noelle to give me a spare key, okay? Hearing this, I realized I couldn't handle it alone anymore. I consulted Noelle about Arya. Noelle, I need to talk to you about your mom. I can't handle this by myself anymore. Mom's issue? What happened? Arya visits our house daily, always without any notice. I do my best to accommodate her when I can, but I can't always be available. I have my own schedule too. Yeah, I get it. And now she wants a spare key to our house. It's hard enough as it is, but if she can enter when we're not home, that's unbearable. If we give her one, she might start coming over all the time. Just the thought is frightening. I'm sorry to speak this way about your mom. Seriously? Mom said that? I don't like the idea of her coming in with a spare key either. Okay, I understand. It might be hard for you to say, so I'll talk to her clearly about it. Noelle was sympathetic to my concerns and promised to talk to Arya. I hope this makes things better. Relieved, I was glad I talked to Noelle. The next day, while I was at work, Arya called. Sierra? What time will you be home today? What do you mean? Well, I made too much beef stew, Noelle's favorite. I thought I'd bring it over. So, what time will you be home? I see. In that case, I should be home a little after 7 o'clock, so I'll definitely be there by 7:30. All right. I'll come around then. Thanks. It might have been the first time Arya called before visiting. Noelle must have talked to her already. I was impressed by how quickly things changed. But honestly, I didn't just want a call before visits. I wanted her to stop visiting altogether. That was my true wish, but for now, I was genuinely happy she called in advance. Arya's visit frequency didn't change, but she started calling beforehand. That alone significantly reduced my stress. However, after a while, I noticed something odd. I started running into Arya more often when I was out. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Like when our family went shopping on the weekend, or when I went to buy toys with my child, or even bumped into her at the station on a weekday evening. Meeting her this frequently seemed too much for coincidence. But strangely, nothing more happened. We'd bump into each other, exchange greetings, explain what we were doing, and that was it. It never led to anything else. Maybe that's why, before I knew it, I had become accustomed to this situation. On one holiday, while this was going on, we decided to clean the house before the delivery of a sofa set Noelle had wanted for a while. We planned to place it in the living room, so that was our primary focus for cleaning. But before we knew it, both Noelle and I got carried away and started cleaning the kitchen and bedroom too. It was a completely accidental discovery. In a corner of the bedroom, there was an inconspicuous outlet that seemed unlikely to ever be used. Only a double outlet adapter was plugged in there. I didn't remember buying it, nor placing it there. Noelle didn't recall it either. Both of us felt something was off. Without saying a word to each other, we started checking all the outlets in the house. We found one mysterious outlet adapter each in the kitchen and living room, and another in the bedroom, making 3 in total. By then, we had a feeling about what it might be. But we were too scared to put it into words.
It's like those things you see on TV sometimes, isn't it? Who would do this, and why?
Where's the banking card? In the middle of my sentence, Noelle suddenly asked about the banking card. What? I was confused, not understanding what Noelle meant. Noelle, noticing my confusion, asked slowly and clearly. Is our banking card here? Has it gone missing? Noelle, too, seemed to have his own thoughts on the matter and quickly checked. After confirming the banking card was safe, Noelle put his finger to his lips and quietly moved us to the living room. We might be bugged, so it's better not to talk about it there. We should be safe here, it's far enough. He said this to reassure me.
Should we call the police in this situation?
As I was about to call the police in a panic, Noelle stopped me. It's good to report to the police, but let's wait. Reporting without knowing who did it might just waste time. I have an idea. We can report it after that. He then shared his plan with me. Honestly, upon hearing it, I wanted to report it immediately. But Noelle seemed to have a hunch. That night, we put the double outlet back in its original place. Wrapped in newspaper, with a fan blowing on it continuously. At 2 a.m., the front door quietly opened. A figure quietly entered and headed straight to the living room. Entering the living room, the figure picked up the double outlet, inspecting it closely. We captured all these actions on camera, and without any warning, turned on the living room lights. The figure panicked at the sudden light. I was momentarily stunned upon seeing the person, but it also felt expected. It was Aria.
So, it was you. We need an explanation, Mom.
Noelle spoke calmly, but there was an underlying anger. But Aria turned her anger towards me instead.
Sierra, what is this all about?
Even in this situation, she seemed not to understand her position.
I just came to check on something, and now even Noelle is looking at me like that. What's going on? Don't play dumb. What were you checking by sneaking into our house in the middle of the night?
What does it matter? More importantly, why are you two so angry with me?
You still don't get it? This was all my husband's idea. We're the ones asking for an explanation, not you, Aria. If you have something to say, answer our questions first. Sierra's right. If you're going to play dumb, we'll call the police. Understand?
Noelle spoke coldly, and Aria's attitude shifted as if she realized there was no other way.
Reporting to the police? That's an overreaction. We're family, there's no need for such formalities. This is all a misunderstanding. So, let's not make a big deal out of it. A misunderstanding, you say?
Then you'd better explain yourself clearly to clear it up, unless we are not convinced. Still claiming it's a misunderstanding at this point? There must be a good reason for it, right, Mom?
Well, it's just, loneliness. I was lonely, so I did it.
Lonely? So you were bugging us? And you expect us to accept that?
All this time, Aria's unannounced visits and frequent encounters when we were out were because she had been eavesdropping and monitoring our movements. Unaware of this, I struggled with the invasion of my personal space by Aria and even blamed myself, thinking I had a problem for not being able to handle it well. I had pushed myself almost to my limit. But it was all because Aria had been eavesdropping. I felt a mix of relief that it wasn't my fault and anger towards Aria's actions, which made my tone and attitude towards her naturally harsher.
Do you really think that reason is enough for us to be satisfied? What you're doing, Aria, is absolutely inexcusable. Don't you understand that?
Sierra's right, Mom. We can't accept that reason, and we can't forgive what you've been doing.
I hate to say it, but what you're doing is wrong. If things continue like this, we can't have a relationship like before.
Wait, Noelle. I'm your parent. How can you say such terrible things to your own mother? You weren't like this before, were you? Aria's face was like that of a forlorn stray cat seeking pity from a passersby. But Noelle was even colder and more distant.
Who's causing this, Mom? You won't admit your own actions, and your reasons are selfish. It's obviously wrong. Enough is enough. We're leaving here. Of course, we won't tell you where we're moving.
Noelle, why?
Aria, please stop. You've betrayed your own son. Don't you understand how he feels?
It seemed the words from her son, Noelle, deeply shocked Aria. She was visibly shaken and flustered. All I wanted was to hear an apology from Aria, for her to admit her wrongdoing and then discuss what to do next. But as soon as I spoke to Aria, she glared at me with intense hostility.
Quiet. You've been saying whatever you want. It's all because of you that I did this. If you hadn't been here, I wouldn't have had to do any of this. If only you hadn't married Noelle.
I couldn't comprehend the sudden outburst from Aria. My fault?
My fault?
I managed to speak, only echoing Aria's words.
That's exactly what I mean. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. I do not acknowledge you as Noelle's wife. You're not suitable. That's what I mean. Why? Why say such things so suddenly?
It's a problem that you've lived this long without understanding such things. Realize it. It's true what they say, children from low-level single-parent homes often have issues. Seeing you has only reinforced that belief. Noelle, finally catching up to the situation, hurriedly tried to stop Aria.
Mom, what are you saying all of a sudden? Do you realize what you're saying?
Yes, I understand perfectly. I thought you would feel constrained by marrying a woman from such a low-level family. That's why I was monitoring, to prevent any problems. It's all for your sake, Noelle. We were baffled by Aria's sudden confession. Especially Noelle, who seemed to be seeing this side of his mother for the first time. He was unsure how to react. My confusion was different from Noelle's. I was perplexed by the words Aria had spoken to me. I had heard those words before. Why had Aria spoken them? That was my confusion. Eventually, I remembered something and asked Aria. Aria, I heard you were a middle school teacher. Is that true?
My question, seemingly unrelated to the situation, caused an exaggerated reaction in Arya. And from her reaction, something clicked for me. If you are a middle school teacher, you must know many other teachers, right? There's a teacher I can't forget. Is she perhaps an acquaintance of yours? I mentioned a name. Upon hearing it, Arya became visibly shaken and stuttered. Why, that name? I thought so. It's connected. Seeing Arya's reaction, I was certain my suspicions were correct. The name I had mentioned was that of my middle school homeroom teacher. I mentioned my middle school homeroom teacher. From your reaction, Arya, it seems you know her. Actually, I was treated terribly by that teacher and got into some trouble. It seems like you've heard about it, haven't you? The trouble with my former teacher was related to my family background. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school. I was taken in by my mom. I was told by my mom that the divorce was due to a personality clash, not because they hated each other. In fact, even after the divorce, my father and I kept in touch regularly. We even had family dinners together several times. Both my parents worked, but they had different life rhythms. There were many mismatches, so they decided it was better to live separately for both of their sakes. Even though they were divorced, I didn't really feel like they were. However, my former homeroom teacher didn't see it that way. She labeled me as a problem child because I came from a single-parent family. Children from low-level single-parent homes are often problematic. I was told that directly. No matter how much I tried to explain, she wouldn't listen. To make things worse, she had a troublesome way of managing the class. She believed in uniting the class by targeting one student. By making one student the scapegoat, the rest of the class would come together. She believed in this method, and I became the target. The reason was simple. I was raised in a single-parent family. Perhaps she thought it was okay to do anything to a problematic child like me. Of course, I couldn't accept such reasoning and resisted desperately. Because one of the reasons was my parents' divorce, I couldn't tell them about the treatment I received from the teacher. Resisting as a middle schooler wasn't easy. When I was cornered beyond my capacity, I finally opened up to my parents. I told them how the teacher was treating me. Fortunately, my parents acted quickly upon hearing my story. There was an immediate discussion with my parents and the teacher, and the issue was resolved. The teacher resigned as the class homeroom teacher and left the school unexpectedly in the middle of the year. The issue was resolved quickly after I confided in my parents, but I still remember it vividly. It was that significant of an event. That's why I reacted to Arya's words. If she was acquainted with such a former teacher, I could easily imagine what she had been told about me. But that didn't make me feel any sympathy for Arya. I understood too well what she thought of me now. It seems, Arya, you didn't hear the whole story from your acquaintance. If you had, you wouldn't have done such a thing. The whole story? What are you talking about? Yes, I was raised in a single-parent home with my mom. But you might not know that I was frequently in contact with my father. Indeed, my parents divorced due to personality differences, but there was another reason: their work. And, by the way, my father is a lawyer. Maybe I'm telling you for the first time, but I am a lawyer's daughter. Knowing that someone related to legal expertise is involved, you can understand what your actions mean, right? What? No, that's a lie! Who would believe that? My former teacher reacted the same way when I told her. You two are quite similar. I didn't hear anything. I haven't heard such a story, no. Of course, no one shares inconvenient truths with others. It's natural. Arya's attitude changed completely from her earlier confidence. No one could imagine being bugged by someone whose relative is a lawyer. It's obvious how dangerous that would be for oneself.
If I tell my father about what you did, you understand what might happen, right? It could become a bigger issue than you think. Stop! Please don't say that. Please, I beg you, don't tell anyone about this. Please, I beg you. If that's the case, then answer our questions, okay?
Yes, I'll answer. Please, I beg of you.
So, you heard everything about me from that acquaintance?
Yes, that's right.
When I mentioned your name, they seemed to know and then. And they started telling you about it?
Yes.
I thought if I found a weakness, I could somehow get Noelle to divorce you.
I see.
That's clear now.
I thought this was probably her true intention. From Aria's demeanor, it didn't seem like she had anything else to hide. At the same time, I was somewhat shocked to know she thought this way about me.
Mom, I have no intention of leaving Sierra, just so you know,
Noelle said to Aria in a firm tone.
I don't understand what you dislike about Sierra or why you did this, and I don't want to know, but Sierra is an important wife and family member to me. Unfortunately, I think it's better if we don't meet anymore to protect my family. That's it.
Yes. Aria could barely respond to Noelle's clear declaration of cutting ties. Understandably overwhelmed by his decision. The next day, at Noelle's insistence, we reported the eavesdropping to my father and the police. We also sent a warning to the former teacher through my father. Surprisingly, the former teacher had no knowledge of Aria's actions. However, given that the teacher's remarks had led to this situation, we strongly demanded she never speak of it again. I can imagine how formidable my father must have been in his anger, but she must have been frightened enough of him. We even received a written pledge that she would never involve herself with us again. After ensuring all these matters were resolved, our family moved. We chose a location near Noelle's workplace but didn't inform Aria at all. As a precaution, we blocked Aria's contact information. Not just me, but Noelle did the same. I heard from neighbors near the in-laws' house that Aria, who had been a long-time educator, had a good reputation. Still, her deeds became widely known when the police got involved. Rumors sparked more rumors, and Aria began to be viewed coldly by everyone in the neighborhood, eventually being left alone. Now, Aria is said to be living alone in her house, with no one visiting her, almost unrecognizable from her former self. Even after hearing about Aria's current situation, I had no intention of forgiving her. In my mind, I've resolved to act as if Aria never existed from the start. Now that I have no ties with Aria, I plan to cherish my family even more. James' first winter had arrived. The weather forecast reported a record chill for the day.
I wonder if Susan and James are okay.
They were the first to come to mind, my son's wife and their newborn. I hoped they weren't falling ill from the cold. Worried, I messaged Susan on my mobile phone that night.
Are you and the baby all right? Hope you guys don't catch a cold.
But after sending the message 2 or 3 times, not only did I not get a reply, but she hadn't even read them. She's serious by nature, so I hoped she wasn't overexerting herself. Waiting an hour more, I tried calling just to be sure, but again, no answer. Something must have happened. Without a second thought, I threw on a thick jacket, rushed out of my house, and drove to my son's family's apartment. Ringing the doorbell yielded no response, and I imagined Susan collapsed inside. I immediately called the apartment manager to have the door unlocked. No lights were on inside, only the faint intrusion of street lights. Groping along the wall, I relied on memory to find the switch. But no matter how many times I flipped it, the electricity wouldn't come on. What's going on? Anxiety and irritation were about to make me explode. Reluctantly, I lit up the interior with my mobile phone's light as I stepped in.
Susan, are you there?
Perhaps they were just out. As I was about to turn back, I thought I heard a baby's cry from the direction of the bedroom. Susan, are you there? I immediately headed toward the bedroom where I thought I heard the voice.
Susan!
There, Susan was shivering from the cold, wrapping the newborn James in a blanket, trying desperately to protect him.
What happened?
Shining the light, I was shocked to see Susan's long hair, her pride and joy, chopped off nearly to baldness.
This is terrible. How could this happen?
My name is Elizabeth, and I am 61 years old. I have worked as a hairdresser for many years in my home-based salon. Enjoying leisurely chats with my beloved clients while working has been my greatest joy. The shop was something my husband and I started together. He passed away from cancer at a young age. It was right after our son, John, was born. Yet, I didn't falter and raised John on my own. However, John wouldn't listen to anything I said and started skipping classes in middle school. When he did go, he caused trouble, and I was called to apologize countless times. After graduating middle school, John started going out every day. Was it a feeling of inferiority because he didn't have a father? Or was it my failure as a mother? Unable to find an answer, I was always worried about John's future. So when one day, out of the blue, John said,
"I want to be a hairdresser,"
I wondered if I was dreaming. What brought this on?
"Being a hairdresser is cool, you know,"
John replied with a laugh. Kids do end up following in their parents' footsteps, no matter what they say. Regardless of the reason, I was happy to see my son finally showing interest in his future. John graduated from beauty school smoothly and began working as an assistant at the shop where the beauty school graduate owned. Susan, who would later become his wife, was also working there, and it seems John was smitten with her at first sight. After a vigorous courtship, they decided to get married. John introduced me to Susan with a confident expression.
"I've decided to marry Susan."
"Nice to meet you, I'm Susan." "You're a hairdresser too, right?" "I look forward to learning from you." Susan was a beautiful woman with a bright smile and long hair that suited her perfectly. "I hope we get along well." I liked Susan the moment I saw her. One day, a year after their marriage, John said he wanted to start his own shop. Though he hadn't been an assistant for long, John seemed to have gained confidence as a hairdresser.
"I want to have my own shop and compete on my own skills as a hairdresser."
Honestly, I was a bit anxious. I knew from years of experience that it's not easy for a newcomer to start their own business in this field. But I couldn't ignore John's serious ambition.
"How much money do you have?"
When I asked, John showed me his bank account with a slightly troubled expression and a sigh. Though his income as an assistant came in every month, he was spending just as much. This wouldn't get him anywhere near the financial stability needed for independence. Most of John's hard-earned income was squandered on frivolities. Perhaps I should have advised him to give up then, but instead, I smiled and acquiesced. "Don't worry about the money." Maybe I was trying to make up for the loneliness of not having a father around all these years. Truth be told, I hadn't touched the life insurance money left by my late husband. For John's sake, I'm sure you will understand. As I gazed at the photo of my late husband, I spoke to him in my heart. Since Linda, who is well-versed in real estate, was among the guests, I decided to consult her. "I think that place would be good for you." It was a property that had been used as a hair salon until 6 months ago, but the owner, being elderly, had apparently closed the shop. "The location isn't bad, so it might just be perfect for your son's startup." Furthermore, when it came time to start the renovation work, Thanks to the help of other guests, the construction went smoothly. And the opening of the shop came in no time. I never thought you would become independent in such a short period. You better thank everyone. You can't do anything on your own, after all. I know that. I'm grateful to you, Mom. After that, I entrusted John with the bank account containing the remainder of my husband's estate. The purchase and renovation costs of the property turned out to be unexpectedly low, so more than half of my husband's estate was still left. This is a gift from Dad to you. Use it carefully for business expenses. Don't ever waste it.
Yeah. I'm not a kid, I know without being told every time.
John chuckled, somewhat annoyed. Elizabeth, please rest assured. I'll keep a strict eye on John to make sure he doesn't use it for anything strange. I couldn't help but laugh at Susan's words. Regardless of John, having the reliable Susan helping out, I thought optimistically that I didn't need to say any more. I decided to watch over their business from afar. However, I soon realized that my thinking had been too naive. Susan, after finishing her work, would occasionally visit my shop to update me on their progress, and each time, her expression grew darker and more troubled. 3 months after my son's independent start, John is not focusing on his work, and it's causing problems.
John? Why?
At the beginning of the shop, John was also enthusiastic. He was full of spirit, and with his skills, the business was sure to prosper. But after a month, his smile disappeared, and he began to treat the customers coldly. This continued for 3 months, and the shop's reputation gradually worsened. Eventually, customers stopped coming. Hearing Susan's report, I was incredulous. John had been the one who wanted to have his own shop. He had been so eager before the opening. What could have happened in such a short time? It seems John thought that being skilled as a barber would be enough, and customer service wouldn't matter. But running a shop isn't like that, Susan said, sighing. Indeed, as Susan said, running a shop isn't just about being a good barber. Being in the service industry, customer service greatly affects the business. It seemed John lacked this basic understanding.
So, what's John doing now?
It seems the lack of customers is making him irritable. He's been drinking from the daytime. This doesn't allow him to focus on work, and even less so, attracting customers. For now, when customers do come, I handle them, but if the shop's reputation continues to fall, it will only get tougher. Susan looked like she was about to cry, but I felt the same way.
I understand. I'll have a stern word with him next time.
Thank you so much, Susan said politely, then brushed back her long hair.
Your hair always looks so mesmerizing.
I changed the subject to dispel the gloomy air.
I've been growing this hair since middle school,
Susan answered proudly.
That long ago? Do you have a particular reason?
Do you know about hair donation? Susan looked at me intently. Hair donation. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Susan's eyes sparkled as she responded. It's about making wigs from real hair for children who have lost their hair due to congenital conditions, illness, or accidents. My goal is to grow my hair to donate to organizations involved in this activity. Don't you think it's wonderful to be able to help someone? I once read a magazine feature about an actress who was growing her hair for hair donation. And so I thought, maybe I could do it too.
Susan, you're still young, but that's very admirable.
I was overwhelmed by Susan's passion, and it deeply moved me. 6 months passed by since John and Susan got married, and that was when Susan became pregnant. Susan is serious by nature, and if I'm not careful, she tends to overdo things. Susan, this is the most crucial time. Don't overdo it. I repeatedly advised her. Every time, Susan would smile lightly and respond, "Don't worry. I'm doing my best within limits, consulting with the baby in my belly." But from what I could see, she hardly ever took a rest. Ultimately, Susan continued to work in the shop to support the household until just before her due date, but John's attitude, the father of the child, had worsened more than ever. What on earth was he thinking? Each time I received an update from Susan, I was reminded of my inadequacy as a mother. One day, after finishing work early, I went to see how my son and his wife's hair salon was doing and happened to meet John, who was just about to go out. "Where are you going?"
Out for a drink. No customers are coming today anyway,
John said, without any sign of hurry, laughing off his circumstances. The lack of customers had become a norm for John, and he no longer showed any effort to improve the situation.
You're about to become a father, you know?
Even when I criticized him, John, as if he couldn't be bothered, waved his hand as if shooing away an insect and mounted his motorcycle.
We're not done talking. Think about Susan for once. Yeah. I'll do that when I feel like it.
With a laugh, John started his motorcycle and sped off, cutting off my words. Upon entering the shop, I found Susan cleaning the floor.
Today, we managed to have one customer come in,
Susan said, smiling brightly, but her face looked more haggard than one would expect of a pregnant woman. "Are you eating properly? Make sure you're getting enough nutrition." "Don't worry, Elizabeth. It's not for you, Susan. It's for the baby in your belly." I spoke a bit harshly, but I deliberately used a strong tone. Susan seemed to understand my real intention and responded with teary eyes. "Thank you. What's the use if the crucial father isn't there to support her at such a time?" I wanted to scream at John, who wasn't there, from the bottom of my heart. According to Susan, the shop's management was far from smooth. Yet, John was out every night, spending money without any limits. It was a mistake to hand over the bank account to that child. I regretted my judgment, but it was too late. Susan never neglected her hair care, no matter how busy she was. Gently stroking her belly, Susan said,
I want to teach the child about to be born the joy of being helpful to someone.
Hearing that, it made me feel that I wanted to support her as much as I could. In place of my useless son, I decided to go to the apartment where Susan and her family lived to help with her chores. "I'm sorry for all the trouble." "Don't worry about it. You just focus on the baby in your belly. It was my fault for raising my son this way." Because of that, Susan was suffering. Maybe it was my way of trying to make amends, however small. At the end of summer, Susan started labor earlier than expected and was rushed to the hospital. Even then, John was unreachable, wandering somewhere. I kept sending messages to John, but no matter how long I waited, I got neither a reply nor even a read receipt. What on earth is he doing at such a time? Since both of Susan's parents had already passed away, I was the only one who could be there for her. "Susan, I'm here, so don't worry." I kept offering words of encouragement to Susan, who was desperately facing childbirth. After a long and difficult labor, I heard the baby's vigorous cry.
"Susan, you did it!"
Tears welled up in my eyes, but John, who was supposed to be there, never showed up. My grandson James faced his first winter. The weather forecast reported record cold, as it was so cold that it was hard to get out of bed. I wondered if they were okay. The first thing that came to mind was Susan and the newly born James. I hoped neither of them had fallen ill due to the cold. Worried, I sent Susan a message on my mobile phone that night. Are you and the baby all right? Hope you guys don't catch a cold. But, after sending the message 2 or 3 times, there was no reply, not even a read. I worried that Susan might have fallen ill and become unable to move. I hoped her serious nature hadn't led her to overdo it. After waiting another hour, I called just to be sure, but the result was the same. Something must have happened. Without a second thought, I put on a thick jacket and rushed out of my home, driving to the apartment where my son's family lived. When I parked in front of the apartment, the house was enveloped in darkness. It's not unusual for families to spend the end of the year and the new year abroad, but I hadn't heard any such plans from Susan and her family. To begin with, they shouldn't have the financial leeway for travel. I rang the doorbell, but there was no response, and I imagined Susan collapsed inside. I immediately called the apartment manager to have the door opened. After thanking the manager who said they would wait outside, I stepped into the house. There was no light anywhere, and only the whiteness of the streetlights faintly seeped in. There should be a light switch right near the entrance, if I remembered correctly. Relying on memory, I groped along the wall to find the switch. However, no matter how many times I flipped it on and off, the electricity didn't respond at all. What's going on? Filled with anxiety and irritation, I reluctantly used my mobile phone's light to illuminate the room and said, "Susan, are you here?" There was no reply when I called out in the living room. Could they just be out? Just as I was about to turn back, I thought I heard a baby's voice coming from the bedroom. "Susan? Are you there?" I immediately headed towards the bedroom where I thought I heard the voice. "Susan!" Susan was shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping her newborn, James, in a blanket to protect him. "What happened?" When I shone the light on her, to my astonishment, Susan's once prideful long hair had been chopped short, almost to a buzz cut. Her eyes were red and swollen as if she had been crying for a long time. "This is terrible. How did this happen?" I took off the jacket I was wearing and draped it over Susan. "It's okay now. You don't have to force yourself, just tell me what you can." "What happened?" Susan began to speak in a slow voice. John had continued to go out every day, just as he did before James was born. Eventually, they could no longer afford the electricity bill. Susan had reached her limit and scolded John, hoping he would show more responsibility as a father. But her hopes did not reach John. Enraged, John, finding practice hair-cutting scissors nearby, began to carelessly cut Susan's long hair. Susan initially tried to resist, but stopped, fearing any harm might accidentally come to James. "Now you won't dare show your face in public," John said, laughing. I was at a loss for words at my son's cruel actions. "Why didn't you tell me it had gotten this bad?" "I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I'm sorry." Susan began to blame herself again. "It's not your fault, Susan. I'm not blaming you. The one at fault is John. You did nothing wrong." Susan must have kept silent not to worry me. I hugged Susan tightly as she cried. This situation was the result of me spoiling John to the extreme. Filled with frustration at my own inadequacy and anger towards my son's inability to empathize with others, my heart was aflame. I took a deep breath and called John. "Mom, it's been a while. What's up all of a sudden?" "I just wanted to hear your voice after so long. How are things there? Are Susan and James doing well?" "Of course. Everyone's doing fine. Nobody answers the home phone." "Where are you now?" John paused for a moment as if searching for an excuse. "Actually, the 3 of us are in Hawaii. We'll be back next week." "Oh, Hawaii, huh? That sounds nice." John boldly lied, thinking I was unaware. What was the point of all my efforts for John? After losing my husband when I was young, I worked non-stop as a hairdresser. All to raise John into a decent person. So when John said he wanted to become a hairdresser and start his own business, I didn't hesitate to fulfill his wish. Yet, John carelessly spent the inheritance left by his father for his own pleasures, without a thought for my feelings. Even worse, he treated his wife and child with unimaginable cruelty. I could never forgive him. My expectations for John turned into disappointment.
What would you like as a souvenir? Look forward to it.
Anything is fine. You're coming back next week, right? Just come back safely.
Hey, Mom, you sound a bit off.
What's wrong? John seemed to be saying something else, but I hung up without paying him any further attention. I thanked the manager who was waiting outside the apartment and decided to take Susan and James back to my home. Then, I called everywhere I could think of. A week passed, and I received a call from John on my mobile phone. He was in high spirits, saying he had just landed at the airport. I'm back. I even bought souvenirs for you. John was trying to play the part of the dutiful son now, but my heart wasn't fooled. That's nice. I replied in a monotone voice, but John seemed oblivious to the change in my tone. Soon, a taxi stopped in front of me. Apparently, he had enjoyed his trip to Hawaii, as you could clearly see the tan lines from sunglasses around his eyes while he unloaded tons of luggage from the trunk. He took out keys from his pocket and headed towards the house where his wife and son were supposed to be waiting. He probably thought the door would open easily once he turned the key. However, no matter how many times he tried, the key wouldn't fit the lock.
What's this? What's going on?
John voiced his irritation. I quietly approached from behind and asked with a smile, "Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii?" Though my heart was boiling with anger.
Mom, you knew?
Seeing me, John somehow looked relieved, as if misunderstanding my presence.
Listen, Mom. I just got back and tried to enter the house, but the key won't fit. It must be some kind of prank by her. Susan must have done this because I went on a trip alone.
He seemed to want to play the victim, blaming Susan. You left Susan and newborn James to go on a trip, and what were you doing?
I've told you 1,000,000 times. I was in Hawaii with my family.
Didn't you just say you went on a trip alone? When I pointed out the contradiction, John was at a loss for words.
To think you could lie about going to Hawaii with your family. Susan was, cut off from electricity, shivering in the cold, holding James close to keep him warm. And to cut off Susan's long hair she was so proud of, don't you feel any remorse as a human being?
That was bad, I admit. But I really need to get inside the house now. It's freezing. John showed no remorse, rubbing his arms for warmth.
The cold Susan and James experienced was nothing compared to this. And your home isn't here anymore. I've canceled the apartment lease. You'll have to find your own place to live from now on. Canceled? Why would you do something like that?
John panicked, but the apartment lease was in my name to begin with. Since we couldn't keep talking outside, I took John to a nearby cafe to listen to him. John sipped the coffee he ordered, probably not tasting anything. His face went pale as he shifted his gaze between me and the coffee.
You were struggling to pay the electricity bill, yet you could afford a trip to Hawaii? About that.
John grimaced, but eventually started to talk. He said he had been showing off to friends and female customers he met at the shop right after opening, using his father's inheritance to live it up. Such spending would quickly deplete even a large inheritance, something John knew well. Yet, after running through the inheritance, John continued to borrow money to buy gifts for his friends and take them on trips. The shop isn't doing well, yet you're quite the spender.
Don't worry. I'm a professional hairdresser. If I put in the effort, customers will come and I can support my family.
Where this confidence came from, John couldn't say, but he answered with conviction. I gave John a cold look.
About your shop, I've already sold it. All the equipment, too. It's too late to get it back now.
And shattered his baseless confidence.
You're lying, right? Why would you do something like that?
John slammed the table, his face turning red.
Oh, you were planning to continue with the shop? I thought you had abandoned it since you left everything to Susan. Besides, I bought the building and the land for the shop and it's in my name. You have no right to complain now. So, my going out was all for attracting customers. I had it all planned out.
John looked like a child about to cry because he couldn't get the toy he wanted.
If you're so confident in your skills, you'll bounce back quickly.
I coldly pushed my son away, leaving only the money for the coffee on the table before exiting the cafe. A month passed. Susan and I avoided contact with John, but bad rumors naturally reach a parent's ears. After being rejected by me, John apparently turned to his friends, asking them for money. But those friends had originally gathered around John for his money. As expected, none of them were willing to help John now that he had lost his financial power. Furthermore, John was reported to the police for stalking female customers he had approached in his shop. Although he got off with just a stern warning from the police, he was thoroughly reminded of the value of personal connections. John then completely vanished from our lives. He's probably living alone and in fear of debt collectors by now. Everything that happened to him was all caused by him and no one else. My anger towards John isn't just about his reckless spending. What's unforgivable is how he neglected Susan and James, pushing them into a difficult life. And for cutting off Susan's long hair, which she had grown out and cared for over many years, for selfish reasons. That foolish act might have robbed unknown children of a brighter future, who would have eagerly awaited Susan's hair. As someone who also works with hair, John's actions are inexcusable. John will need a long time to understand the pain Susan has endured. Susan herself doesn't speak of her emotional pain, but it's clear she's hurt. She seems to keep her feelings to herself, not wanting to worry me. Wanting to help somehow, I asked my fellow hairdressers to make a wig especially for Susan. It won't make up for my son's mistakes, but please use this.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Susan smiled and thanked me, but tears were rolling down her cheeks. Using my back pain as an excuse, I asked Susan to help out in the shop. Susan threw herself into work, as if trying to forget her emotional scars. When customers spoke to James, he would burst out laughing. Now, there are customers who visit the shop just to see James. Susan, gradually regaining her physical and emotional strength, has started to take steps towards divorcing John. The presence of Susan and James brightens and enlivens the shop. Drawn by Susan's cheerful atmosphere, many women, also raising children, started coming to the shop as customers.
All right, let's work hard and do our best.
Today, like any other day, the shop is filled with smiles. In the corner of the shop, James is sleeping soundly, making cute little snores.